What if the people you sacrificed everything for left you out like you never mattered? This isn't just a story.
It's a reckoning. The wrecked beneath the surface.
They say the biggest betrayals come not from enemies, but from those you love the most. I didn't understand that until a quiet Sunday afternoon, when the sound of rustling paper changed the course of everything I thought I knew. It was supposed to be a typical visit. I had brought over groceries organic, on sale, just like Mom liked. I made her tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and listened to the creaking of the old house as she disappeared into the garden to tend to her orchids. The same routine I'd repeated for years. I never thought that day would mark the end of an era, the era where I believed my place in the family was safe, honored, and cherished. For over a decade, I had lived in the role of the reliable daughter.
The fixée.
The one who showed up when the sink broke, when the insurance lapsed, when the hospital bills piled up. I knew the number to the local electrician by heart. I had a spreadsheet tracking their medications. And yet, when the air in the house was quiet and warm, I always told myself, this is love. Mia was always the opposite.
À délicate messe ou rapide in charme.
She flitted through jobs, partners, cities. She chased whims and left trails. And somehow, those trails never turned into scars, because my parents' love for her was an infinite safety net. They found poetry in her failures, excuses in her patterns, and pity in her dependence. I didn't mind. Not really. Because in some quiet, deep part of me, I believed that responsibility was love. That if I kept the foundation steady, they'd know I was the one holding it all up. Until I opened that folder. It had been stuffed between unpaid property tax notices and expired warranty slips. Cream-colored, slightly bent. Estate plan and will. The kind of envelope that trembles in your hand, even when you don't know why. I unfolded it slowly. My fingers traced the bolded legal language like it was written in a language I used to know but had forgotten.
I searched for my name.
And kept searching.
The house, to Mia.
The car, to Mia. Savings, jewelry, heirlooms, even the little chest of silverware my grandmother had promised me when I was 15, to Mia.
My name wasn't there.
Not in the clauses. Not in the footnotes. Not even in the list of emergency contacts. There was only one line, we love both our daughters. That's when it hit me, love in their eyes wasn't about equity. It was about who needed more. And since I never cried, never fell apart, never asked for anything, I didn't qualify. I was stunned into silence. I didn't even realize Mom had returned until her shadow fell across the table. Did you find the tax statement? She asked casually, wiping soil from her fingers. I held up the will. Her smile faltered. She didn't move. Her eyes dropped to the paper, then to my face. Oh, she said. That was it. Not let me explain. Not it's not what it looks like. Just, oh. Is this real? I asked. She nodded, slowly, like someone admitting to something they never thought they'd get caught doing. You're strong, she said finally. We thought you'd be okay. Mia, she needs more support. I couldn't speak. Not out of rage, but out of disbelief. All those years, the night shifts, the emergency calls, the savings I drained to save this very house, had been invisible. They didn't see my strength as a gift. They saw it as a justification.
If he could endure, why give me anything? Mia got the house.
I got a sentence.
My dad wasn't home.
But I imagined how he'd react, calm, dismissive. Practical to a fault. He would sip his coffee, say it wasn't a big deal. You don't need a house to know you're loved. But that was the problem, wasn't it? They didn't think I needed anything. That day, I walked out of the house. Not with slamming doors. Not with screaming. But with the kind of silence that says this time, I mean it. I walked away from the chipped bricks I had patched. The kitchen I had repainted. The memories that felt like they were mine but were now, officially Mia's. I didn't go back the next day. Or the next week. Or the next month. And somewhere in the quiet space of that absence, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Myself. The silence that spoke volumes.
Silence used to be my comfort.
It was the space between responsibilities. The pause in a conversation where I could finally breathe. The quiet of my own apartment after a long day of holding the weight of other people's lives. But after that Sunday, silence became something else entirely. It became an echo. 2 weeks passed. Not a single phone call.
Knock knock on the door.
No text asking where I went or why I hadn't come back. At first, I told myself maybe they were giving me space. Maybe they were ashamed. Maybe they didn't know what to say. But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't notice I was gone. Or worse, they noticed and decided not to care. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, my phone buzzed. Mortgage due Friday.
Can you transfer soon? No greeting. No mention of the will.
No apology.
Just another transaction request, like nothing had happened.
I stared at the message for a long time.
My coffee won't cold in Mayan.
Part of me waited for a follow-up message.
Something warmer. Something human. Nothing calm. He tipped my reply slowly.
Ask Mia. It's her house now. And I meant it. 10 minutes later, another buzz.
Mom, Anna, don't do this.
We need to talk. But there was no request for forgiveness. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a plea to keep playing the same role.
That night, il est awake staring at the ceiling, my heart strangely calm.
I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was done. 3 days later, Mia messaged me.
You're overacting.
Mom and Dad didn't mean it like that. You've always been independent. I'm just not. I read her words again and again, marveling at the audacity. As if independence were something I had been gifted, rather than something I had been forced to learn. I replied. Then prove you deserve what you've been given. Start by paying the mortgage. She left me on read. The next few weeks felt like peeling off layers of armor. I called the bank and removed myself from the joint account. I cancelled every auto payment I had been secretly managing. I even deleted the recurring reminders on my phone. Each beep had been a reminder that I was carrying lives that weren't mine. I felt lighter. Then came the message request from my mom again. No words.
Just a bank transfer request. $2.9.
Due immediately. No message. Just a number and a deadline. I declined it. Coldly. Immediately. The phone rang within seconds.
He let it buzz 4 times before hanging up.
Then the text. Hannah, I know you saw it. Why did you decline? I stared at that question.
The entitlement. The absence of remorse.
I replied. Because it's no longer my responsibility. Ask Mia. And in that moment, I felt something new. Not guilt. Power. The phone didn't ring again that night. But it wouldn't be long. I wish I could say they accepted it. That they adjusted. That the absence of my presence forced them to reflect. Instead, they went public.
Africain sans ma screenshot of my mother's Facebook post.
It's heartbreaking when your own child turns her back on family. We sacrificed everything for her. Now we face foreclosure, and she won't even answer our calls. Dozens of likes. Comments from relatives I hadn't seen in years.
Condemning.
Judging.
Calling me cold.
Ungrateful. Then another post. This time from Mia. Some people are only generous when they get credit for it. But when family needs help quietly, they disappear. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, my hand shaking not from sadness, but from disbelief. I had carried these people for years. Quietly. Without asking for anything. Now, when I refused to carry them further, I was the villain. That night, I did something I never thought I would. I opened my own social media account.
One irrarely touched.
I wrote a single post.
My silence wasn't consent.
It was exhaustion. But here is the truth. Attached were
screenshot of the will.
Proof of mortgage payments in my name. Bank statements. Text messages asking for money. The response was immediate. People messaged me. Some apologized for judging. Others shared their own stories. How they had been the reliable ones, the invisible pillars of their families. And how one day, they too had walked away. Within 48 hours, my parents took down their posts. Mia deactivated her profile. But I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being called to clean up a mess I didn't make. And in that space where guilt once lived, I found something else blooming. Freedom.
À différents quins of peas.
Peace isn't always soft. Sometimes, it comes wearing the face of finality. I didn't expect the next chapter of my life to be beautiful. I just hoped it wouldn't be heavy. But when you've spent most of your adulthood bracing for the next emergency, it takes time to learn what to do with stillness.
The house, on sa constant présence in my daily life, faded into the background.
I stopped checking on its gutters, its bills, its maintenance. I stopped driving past it just to see if the lights were still on. I started waking up without that jolt of panic. I signed up for a weekend photography class at the community center. I baked. I read. I walked slowly through grocery store aisles for the first time in years, not rushing, not calculating which brand was cheapest, not buying extra for a household that wasn't mine. Then one morning, a call came from an old neighbor. "Hey, I don't mean to intrude, but I heard your parents are trying to sell the house. They seem overwhelmed." I thanked her, heart steady. A week later, I saw the listing.
218 Elm Street. $390,000.
Price dropped.
Motivated seller.
The photos showed what time and neglect will do when love isn't paired with effort.
Rotting shingle. Peeling paint.
Dead grass where mom's orchids used to bloom. I recognized it, but only faintly. It was a shell of what I had fought to preserve. And yet, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. They had chosen this. I had warned them. Pleaded, in my own quiet ways.
He gave years.
Thousands of dollars. My youth. And in the end, all I asked for was to be seen. But they chose to see only my usefulness. And when I stopped being useful, they tried to shame me back into servitude. But I didn't return. Then came the final act.
A knock at my door.
It was a cold Saturday afternoon. The kind where the air bites and makes even silence sound sharp. I opened the door to find all three of them, Mom, Dad, Mia, standing outside my building. No words. Just bags under their eyes and desperation hanging like fog around them. "We're sorry," Mom said. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. "We made a mistake," Dad added. He looked smaller somehow. Mia didn't say anything. Her eyes darted between us like a child waiting for permission to speak. They asked for help.
Not money this time.
Just guidance. Just advice. Just me once again, stepping in to untangle the knots they tied around themselves. "I'm not in that role anymore," I said, each word carved in stone. They nodded. "We thought you'd be okay," Mom whispered. "You've always been the strong one." I smiled sadly. Strength doesn't mean I deserved less. No one had an answer to that. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. They left eventually. Quietly. And I returned to my tea and my book, untouched by the chaos that used to follow me like a shadow. The house stayed on the market. Then I heard Mia had moved back in. That she was doing the grocery runs now. That the bank had sent a notice of foreclosure. But I didn't flinch. I didn't race to save them. I had finally stopped being the emergency exit.
One day, my mother mailed me a letter. Handwritten.
Blue ink. The kind of cursive that carried both habit and hope. She said she missed me. That Dad wasn't as strong anymore. That Mia was trying, but lost. That maybe, just maybe, they had taken me for granted. At the end, she wrote, "I don't know how much time we have to fix this. But if you're willing, I'm still here." I folded it. I didn't rip it. I didn't respond. I placed it in the drawer beneath my desk, next to old photographs and unfinished journal entries. Things that needed time. Now, I live differently.
My morning begin with purpose, not panic.
I teach photography at the community center. My students are curious, hopeful. Their joy isn't rooted in obligation. It's the kind that reminds you the world still holds beauty.
I share my story online.
Anonymously at first. Then more openly. People reach out. They say I gave them the courage to say no, to step away, to choose themselves. And that, I realize, is the gift I gave myself too.
Not just escape.
But transformation. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of self. And I am finally fully myself. No longer the family anchor. Just a woman who decided to stop drowning for others who refused to learn how to swim. I didn't abandon them. I chose me. And I don't regret it. Not even for a moment. Sometimes, the hardest part of healing isn't walking away. It's staying away when they come crawling back. But I did. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rescue anyone.
I rescued myself.
So if you've ever been the quiet one, the strong one, the one everyone leaned on until you broke, know this. You are allowed to step out of the fire, even if you were the one holding the hose. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not heartless for choosing healing. And you are never wrong for choosing you. Thank you for listening to this powerful story on Secret Affairs Stories.
If this touched something deep inside you, you're not alone.
Share your thoughts in the comments. Like if you've ever had to walk away from the people who should have protected you. And subscribe for more stories that uncover the truths we're too afraid to say out loud.
Because here,
every secret has a voice.